What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Week 5 has wrapped up, so you know what time it is. We have got our Week 6 waiver wire pickups, so let's get right into it. Kicking things off at the quarterback position, we start out with Jared Goff, who might be a decent pickup if he's available on your waiver wires this week. Now, not the ideal matchup versus a 49ers defense that has been pretty stingy, but for what it's worth, Goff has been better at home. He's been a little bit hot and cold, which might have gotten some owners frustrated, but keep in mind that this Rams offense, even though it's not as good as in years past, not as potent, it has become more pass heavy with the current careful usage of Todd Gurley. So that means more passing opportunities for Jared Goff and all those pass catchers included. In this divisional contest, I imagine it's going to be a high scoring affair. So again, Jared Goff in week 6 might not be a bad play, but more so if he's available, a long-term option. Next, we have got Jimmy Garoppolo, the quarterback on the other side of that Rams 49ers matchup. And more so here, he might be the better addition because the 49ers, more than likely, even though they've played very good defense, will give up some points versus this aerial attack of the Rams offense. And in that scenario, the 49ers aren't just going to be able to rely on rushing the football. The 49ers will have to air out the ball, and I do think Jimmy Garoppolo should have a successful day. Look, this last week on Monday night, he had 181 yards passing and 2 passing touchdowns, but he didn't really have to do anything. The 49ers dominated with that defense and with their rushing attack, but again, I think that script will be flipped next week where it'll be an aerial showdown. So I look for Jimmy Garoppolo to put up some decent passing stats. Next up, we've got Matthew Stafford, who low-key has been pretty consistent so far this season, and an offense that has allowed him to get back to passing the football, to really airing it out with some weapons on the outside as well, and utilizing Kerryon Johnson as a pass catcher on top of that. Now, some owners might have gotten a little bit frustrated with the bye week. Matthew Stafford, not elite quarterback, but he is definitely serviceable, and if he was dropped in order to free up a roster spot, then go ahead, do yourself a favor, pick him up. The Detroit Lions now are done with their bye weeks, and they've got a week 6 divisional matchup versus the Green Bay Packers, who, look, they have an improved defense, but these last 2 weeks, they have been taken advantage of a little bit, and the Detroit Lions have proven to be pretty potent offensively, somewhat surprisingly, these first couple of weeks. So week 6 contest versus this Packers squad, even though it might not result in a win for the Lions, I think could be a good fantasy stat line for Stafford. Our fourth and final quarterback is Case Keenum. Again, probably not too popular of a name here, but anytime you potentially face the Miami Dolphins defense, you have to be included. Now, obviously, Keenum was not available this last week versus the New England Patriots. It was the Colt McCoy show, and there's going to be a lot of changes in Washington with the firing of Gruden. So that's going to be something to also keep an eye out for. But I do think, without a doubt, out of all the quarterbacks that are available on that roster, Case Keenum provides the Redskins with the best chance to win. And if he is healthy, if he starts that contest, I think he can go ahead and put together a decent stat line versus a Miami defense that has been getting torched left and right, regardless of who has gone up against them all season long. Moving to our running backs, we continue the trend with another Washington player, this time in Adrian Peterson. Look, even though Peterson's efficiency has been absolutely terrible, this firing of Jay Gruden might be just what this Washington offense needs. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of problems on that squad other than Gruden, but maybe these next couple of weeks, we're going to see a change in game plan, and it's going to be a more run-heavy type of offense. The Miami defense will definitely provide opportunities here for scoring, not only for the running backs, for the pass catchers, but also for the quarterbacks. I'd go ahead and speculatively add Adrian Peterson. If you're really desperate, he still projects to be the starting running back, and this is going to be as favorable as a matchup as he's going to have all year. Next, we've got Ito Smith of the Falcons, who this last week versus the Texans 5 rushes for 19 yards, nothing too special there, but he did have 6 receptions for 45 yards through the air. And when we look at the Week 6 matchup versus the Arizona Cardinals, it's a very favorable one. Even though Devonta Freeman might be the back to own in that backfield, he hasn't been all that dominant, which has created opportunities for Ito Smith, sometimes even in the red zone. And just because this projects to be a very high-scoring affair, because both of these squads have poor defenses, the Falcons and the Cardinals included, I do think Ito Smith will have his opportunities here to go ahead and provide decent flex numbers for that running back position. Next, we go to Chase Edmonds of the Arizona Cardinals, a guy that, in the absence of David Johnson, looks like to be the handcuff to own for the Cardinals. And while David Johnson was potentially dealing with some back issues, Edmonds had a pretty good outing, got into the end zone. And again, this is a matchup versus the Atlanta Falcons that, if something happens with David Johnson, even though that back issue does not seem serious, look for Edmonds to fill in. And there is an outside chance, even if David Johnson is healthy, that Edmonds does see some game time action. But without a doubt, this is an ad for all those David Johnson owners. Edmonds has emerged as the clear-cut handcuff, so do yourself a favor. If anything does happen to David Johnson, invest a pickup in Edmonds. If you don't have DJ, then Edmonds not really worth a pickup here. Our fourth and final running back is Reggie Bonnafon of the Panthers in a pretty much identical situation to Chase Edmonds. Our last mention here, Bonnafon is nothing more than a handcuff pickup. Yes, he had success last week in a relief effort of Christian McCaffrey when he cramped up. He went ahead, put together some yardage, found the end zone. But as long as McCaffrey is healthy, Bonnafon will not really be seeing playing time. This is more so an addition for a handcuff for all those Christian McCaffrey owners, because it finally seems like we have a clear-cut answer to who will fill in for that running back position if something does happen to McCaffrey. Moving on to our wide receivers, we start with Auden Tate of the Bengals, who only had 3 receptions for 26 yards, but did save his day with a touchdown this last week versus the Cardinals. And Week 6's matchup versus the Ravens will be tougher, but keep in mind, the Ravens these last 2 weeks kind of defensively have been getting exposed. And with Auden Tate, John Ross on IR, it's all about volume, it's all about opportunity. And I'd go ahead and say he's worth a tentative ad if you're desperate at the flex spot. Might go ahead, roll him out versus a Baltimore defense that has been getting taken advantage of as of late. Next, we have got DeVante Parker of the Miami Dolphins. And honestly, it pains me to mention a Miami Dolphin here. But anytime you play the Washington Redskins, that will translate into some type of opportunity. And don't get me wrong, this is only a 1-week addition, a 1-week mention for DeVante Parker. But he has looked like he's developed some chemistry with Rosen. It seems like he's by far the most capable pass catcher that the Dolphins have. And he might be worth a flyer if you really are desperate at that pass catching position. Our third and final wide receiver is Paul Richardson, another pass catcher in this Miami-Washington matchup, which, if you haven't figured it out by now, it's very favorable for both sides and could low-key actually be kind of high scoring. That's why you're looking at all these options. And if Scary Terry, for some reason, has a setback, he doesn't play well, it could be the Paul Richardson show. He has that speed to go ahead and take advantage of defensive matchups. And if something happens, like we said, to Scary Terry, he could be that number 1 option for Case Keenum or whoever plays quarterback for the Redskins. So this will be a situation to go ahead and kind of track as the week progresses. But Paul Richardson could be a boom or bust option that delivers in fantasy in Week 6. Moving on to our tight ends, we start with Chris Herndon. This is a guy that we've mentioned a couple times already, but he's finally eligible to return from his suspension. Week 6 would be that week for him to take the field for the first time. It's not really a favorable matchup versus the Dallas Cowboys. We still don't know the status of Sam Darnold. But with the tight end position being a crapshoot like it pretty much is every single year, unless you have one of the elite guys, Herndon might be someone that's worth taking a risk on. And if he has a big game, this might be the last week to do so. Our second and final tight end is Gerald Everett of the Rams, who absolutely blew up in week 5. 7 receptions for 136 yards. We've seen the Rams use more 2 tight end sets, and Everett was the guy that benefited from this in week 5. Now, look, it's completely possible that Everett might play second fiddle to Higbee in week 6, and it might be a rotation moving forward. But with the tight end, sometimes you go with the hot hand and that previous performance the week before. And it definitely is Everett. Like I said before, I do think this 49ers-Rams matchup will be high scoring and the Rams will focus on the passing attack. So Everett might not be a bad flyer at the tight end position. Finally, getting to our defenses, we start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who will be playing the Carolina Panthers in week 6. And maybe on the surface, this isn't a good matchup because the Bucs will have to face Christian McCaffrey. But guess what? Out of all the teams that McCaffrey has faced so far, the Bucs by far were the ones that effectively shut him down most successfully. And they've got a good run defense. It could potentially be a long day for McCaffrey, or he could have a revenge game. But nonetheless, Kyle Allen, even though he's put together 3 wins for the Carolina Panthers, he hasn't necessarily lit it up through the air unless you count that Arizona matchup where that defense, it's nothing really to write home about. This Bucs defense, definitely a bit better. Last time they played the Panthers, they held them to a decent point performance from the defensive side. Now, obviously, that was with a hobbled Cam Newton. But again, I still haven't seen all that much from Kyle Allen to tell me that he's going to pick apart this Bucs defense. I believe they're going to go ahead, get a couple sacks on him, maybe a strip sack or 2, which is something that he struggled with. So the Bucs in London, this being a neutral zone, I'd go ahead, take a chance on them considering what they were able to do against the Panthers, specifically Christian McCaffrey earlier this year. Next, we go to the Dallas Cowboys, who faced the New York Jets in week 6. And the Cowboys defense had a tough outing versus the Green Bay Packers, where they got pretty much run through in week 5 via Aaron Jones. But the New York Jets are not on the same level as the Green Bay Packers. Even if Sam Darnold returns here, that's going to be the big if, because we've seen what this offense is with Luke Falk under center. Just check what the Philadelphia defense did in week 5 versus the Jets. But even if Sam Darnold returns, he'll probably be a little bit rusty. The Cowboys are a better squad here. I expect them to go out with a lead, and that's going to force the Jets to throw the football, giving you some opportunities for turnovers. So I like the Cowboys defense in week 6. Our third and final defense for this week is that of the LA Chargers, who face the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this is more so of a quarterback situation yet again, because no Big Ben. All right, insert Mason Rudolph. Even though he struggled, he somewhat had some type of chemistry with these guys. But guess what? He gets knocked out, brutal type of hit last week, concussed. And even though it seems like it wasn't as bad as it initially seemed, I doubt he takes the field in week 6, which means third string quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers versus a hungry, desperate LA Chargers team. And I think that's going to translate to a successful game, not only for the Chargers offensively, but defensively as well. So with that, we wrap up our waiver wire targets for week 6. And as always, let me hear it in the comment section. Did you agree, disagree with the names included? Are there others that you'd go ahead and include, along with any other questions you guys might have? And in the meantime, if you enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in future videos.